Often referred to as the Dismal Swamp, the Great Dismal Swamp is a big swamp that is situated in the coastal plain region between the cities of Norfolk and Elizabeth City, in the southeastern part of Virginia, and the northeastern part of North Carolina. It is highly wooded, and has natural elevations ranging from 10 to 20 feet above sea level. The Pamlico Formation, also known as the Great Dismal Swamp Terrace, rises to 25 feet or more along the western edge, establishing a natural border. According to some estimates, the original swamp covered over 1 million acres. At present, the Great Dismal Swamp covers an area of about 1,940 square kilometers. The Great Dismal Swamp's climate is influenced by the Atlantic Ocean, Chesapeake Bay, and Albemarle Sound. It experiences a humid subtropical climate, with long humid summers and mild winters. The average temperature of Virginia is 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and rainfall occurs all year, with 45.74 inches of precipitation and 8.8 inches of snowfall. During the winter, northwesterly winds impact the Great Dismal Swamp, whereas southwesterly winds influence it during the summer. History of Great Dismal Swamp. Great Dismal Swamp Canal. Great Dismal Swamp Canal. It is uncertain who found the Great Dismal, and when. Colonel William Byrd II examined and described the North Carolina/Virginia state border across the swamp in 1728. Colonel Byrd proposed draining the marsh and creating a north-south channel across it to link the waters of Virginia's Chesapeake Bay and North Carolina's Albemarle Sound. George Washington visited the swamp and formed both the Dismal Swamp Land Company and the Adventurers for draining the Great Dismal Swamp with numerous other famous Virginians and North Carolinians. This group intended to drain the swamp, cut the trees, and farm the area. In 1763, the company paid $20,000 for 40,000 acres of swamp property. Washington oversaw the mapping and excavation of Washington Ditch, which runs from the western tip of the swamp to Lake Drummond, and Riddick Ditch was finished in the late 1700s. These ditches worked together to move logs out of the swamp while also draining it. The adventurers quickly learned that the process of emptying the swamp was huge and abandoned that portion of their strategy to focus on lumbering. They harvested several cypress trees for shipbuilding and cedar trees for shingles and other items. The Dismal Swamp was a well-known path and location for freedom seekers. This was the most complex and dangerous route, full of insects, snakes, and wild creatures. Many runaways ended up in this desolate location. Many freedom seekers decided to seek sanctuary in the Great Dismal Swamp amid a colony of runaways known as Maroons. Because of the swamp's unique characteristics, vast colonies were able to establish a permanent shelter. It was difficult to apprehend a fugitive after they entered the swamp. However, special trained dogs were used on occasion to catch runaways. Colonies were formed on high ground in the swamp, with primitive cottages built. Preservation of the Great Dismal Swamp. Painted turtles in Great Dismal Swamp. Painted turtles in Great Dismal Swamp. Conservation groups across the United States began demanding the preservation of the remaining Great Dismal Swamp and the restoration of its wetlands in the mid-20th century, which was recognized as vital habitat for a broad range of birds, animals, plants, and other living things. The Union Camp Corporation, a paper company located in Franklin, Virginia, with substantial land holdings in the region, granted over 49,000 acres of land to the Nature Conservancy in 1973. The property was transferred to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service the following year. During this period, the National Park Service designated a 45,611-acre section of the swamp as a National Natural Landmark in 1973, owing to its unique combination of geological and ecological features. The Dismal Swamp Act of 1974 authorized the establishment of the Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. The refuge has about 107,000 acres of wooded wetlands, with the 3,100-acre Lake Drummond at its heart. The refuge's resource management initiatives strive to recover and sustain the swamp's natural ecological variety, including its water supplies, native plant types, and animal species. Lake Drummond. View of Virginia's Lake Drummond on a sunny day. View of Virginia's Lake Drummond on a sunny day. Lake Drummond is a freshwater lake situated at the heart of the Great Dismal Swamp. The lake's origins are unknown. Several hypotheses have suggested the lake's origin, including that the lake was formed by a meteor/comet strike, a fire that burnt a deep hole in the peat soil, or sustained winds during the last ice age that built an artificial barrier of sand that impeded normal drainage. Lake Drummond and part of the Great Dismal Swamp are protected by the Great Dismal Swamp National Wildlife Refuge, which was established by the Dismal Swamp Act of 1974. The lake has a low nutrient content due to the leaching of acidic elements from nearby peat soils. A few fish species are there, including crappie, bowfin, and long-nosed gar. Great Dismal Swamp today. Today, the swamp is a vibrant ecosystem and one of Virginia's most attractive sites to explore. The swamp has a lot to offer, from nature paths to exhilarating activities in and around Lake Drummond. Unfortunately, the swamp has been plagued by fires during droughts and drier seasons in recent years. It is not uncommon for the marsh to catch fire, and smoke may be seen from Richmond. Today, Lake Drummond is the hub of activity in the swamp, drawing fishermen, tourists, and boaters, but the refuge does not permit camping. Share. Carol Salmon, June 2, 2022, in Landforms. More in Landforms. Girl taking pictures of the Mount Hood, Oregon from inside of the car. What is the best way to experience Oregon's tallest mountain? The top of Mount Mitchell, the highest peak in eastern U.S. Editorial credit, Rosemary Mosteller /Shutterstalk.com. The tallest mountains in the eastern United States. Mount Assiniboine is the pyramid-shaped peak at center, high above Lake Magog. Explore the most iconic mountain in the Canadian Rockies. View of the Green Mountains in Vermont. This mountain range in Vermont rivals those on the west coast. Aerial view of Ono Island, Alabama. The most beautiful islands in Alabama. Row of concrete pillars and metal arches on Rose Island, Indiana. The most beautiful islands in Indiana. Morning sunrise on Lake of the Woods, Minnesota. Taken at Rocky Point Resort. The most beautiful islands in Minnesota. Upstream entry to the chain of rock bypass canal from the Mississippi River above St. Louis. Aerial view at dawn. The most beautiful islands in Illinois. Fenwick Island Lighthouse in Delaware. Image credit George Sheldon via Shutterstock. The most beautiful islands in Delaware. Presque Isle Lighthouse in Erie, Pennsylvania, at dusk. The most beautiful islands in Pennsylvania. Aerial view of South Base Island, including the harbor and town, as seen from Perry's Victory and International Peace Memorial in Put-in Bay, Ohio. Editorial credit, LouKenCarla.travel/Shutterstock.com. The most beautiful islands in Ohio. Late afternoon summer photo of the North Lighthouse, New Shoreham, Block Island, Rhode Island. The most beautiful islands in Rhode Island. World Atlas logo. All maps, graphics, flags, photos, and original descriptions, copyright 2025 worldatlas.com. The Great Dismal Swamp Maroons were people who inhabited the swamplands of the Great Dismal Swamp in Virginia and North Carolina after escaping enslavement, and their descendants. Although conditions were harsh, research suggests that several thousand lived there between the late 17th century and the 1860s. Harriet Beecher Stowe told the Maroon people's story in her 1856 novel Dread, A Tale of the Great Dismal Swamp. The most significant research on the settlements began in 2002 with a project by Dan Sayers of American University. The first Africans brought to the English colony of Virginia arrived in 1619 on the White Lion, an English privateer operating under a letter of marque from the Dutch Republic. These Africans, numbering roughly 20 strong, had been seized from a Portuguese slave ship São João Bautista by the crew of White Lion as the slaver was transporting them from Portuguese Angola to the Americas. 2. 3. The Africans were legally deemed to be indentured servants, since slave codes were not passed in Virginia until 1661. 4. As indentured servants, they were automatically entitled to freedom after the passage of a certain period of time, and were also allowed to purchase freedom as 5 other indentured servants gained freedom by converting to Christianity, since the English colonists of Virginia were opposed to the enslavement of Christians. 6. Slave labor was used in many efforts to drain and log the Great Dismal Swamp during the 18th and 19th centuries. 7. People who escaped slavery by running away to the countryside came to be known as Maroons. 8, 7, 9.